Coach Schuman here for the Successful Life podcast. I'm here with Mark Herschberg. Glad to have him as a guest. We're going to talk your career today and the things you need to know. We're going to talk a little bit MIT as well here because that's where Mark is a part-time professor. But he is the guru of understanding the things that are needed in order to have a great career in whatever it is you do. He's gone and interviewed and talked with leaders in various different industries and has put together a great book called The Career Toolkit that really hones in on exactly the skills needed in order to have a successful career. Welcome to the Successful Life podcast, Mark.
Thanks for having me on. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you because this is a topic that is broad enough that everyone is definitely going to have an interest. And so many people go through their career and don't really know what they're doing. So this is you've written a book on this exact topic. You teach on various topics related to it. And I'd like you to kind of just tell everyone a little bit of your background and where you come from and how you got to this point.
Sure. I've got a really unique background that led to this dual career. I went to MIT as an undergrad and grad student back in the 90s, and when I came out, I started as a software engineer. Early in my career, I realized I wanted to become a CTO. That's a chief technology officer, the person in charge of the engineers. What I soon realized was that it didn't just mean I was the best engineer or most experienced engineer. To get that role, not only did I need engineering skills, but I needed a whole bunch of other skills: leadership, team building, communicating, negotiating, a whole bunch of skills no one ever taught me. So I had to develop those skills in myself. As I was doing so, I realized these skills are not just for executives. They are for everyone: senior leaders, middle management, individual contributors, summer interns, entrepreneurs. All of us benefit from these skills. So I began to upskill my team. Now, as I was doing this, MIT had been doing some surveys of companies and found companies wanted these same skills, not just for MIT students, not just for college students, but universally. And other schools and other surveys have found the same thing. These skills: leadership, communication, networking, negotiating, these are skills companies want, but they aren't being taught. So at MIT, we created what's now referred to as the Career Success Accelerator. And when I heard about it, I offered to give them some of the content I developed for my teams. They asked me to develop more content and stay on to help teach, which I've been doing for the past 20 years. So I've had my main career building tech startups, helping Fortune 500s place startup, doing a whole bunch of different things, from tracking terrorists and cyber criminals to building labor markets, creating a bunch of patents, new technologies, new communication platforms, but also teaching at MIT and elsewhere, and now the book and the speaking that I do to teach these professional skills to other people.
Great. Well, I think one of the things that we all realize when we get into an executive level role is that it's not just your expertise within that subject area that's important. It's how you manage people, how you relate to people, how you can motivate people, how you can get people to do things that you're hoping to be able to accomplish, setting goals, strategy, tactics. There's a lot of different things that end up to being real important when you get into a management role. And there's a lot of skills that you got to develop along the way. And I think it's really interesting about your book is that we're going to dive deep into those areas because people can gain a lot of success. So for example, engineers, right? MIT, that is the expertise of MIT is engineering, right? So people who go there to become an engineer, they develop that specific skill set, whether it's a civil engineer or any type of engineer they're trying to become. They get that skill set and be really wildly successful early on because they have an expertise in an area, right? Move up quickly. And then all of a sudden they're in charge, which is what leads to what you're gonna talk about much more. What are some of the things that you encountered in writing this book that you found really fascinating?
First, the fact that we don't teach it, because this is not a surprise. I'm sure this is not the first time the audience is hearing terms like networking and leadership. We've heard it. In fact, growing up, I remember hearing from my parents and teachers and others, oh, networking is so important. It's not what you know, it's who you know. We know this, we've talked about it, and yet no one stops and sits you down and says, and by the way, here's how to do it. We just ignore that. And there are historical reasons why we do it. So that was very surprising. And then the fact that companies as well have abdicated any real type of training for people, and we just leave people on their own to be successful. If we can help people get a little bit better, you can have a massive impact on their success. And yet we don't put that effort in, we as a society.
Very interesting. I think it must go back to the foundations of how workforce was originally developed and how educational systems were developed around the workforce. So originally being agricultural based, and then moving into the industrial age where you needed people to do specific tasks really well, right? You needed quote unquote workers to work. And now we're much more in the information age where some of the things, what we call, you might call soft skills, are so valuable because you're dealing with people in a lot of different capacities. And originally, when technology became so big, the internet, you know, towards the end of my college career and yours as well, I went to school in the 90s as well. When you hit 2000, people thought that automation and technology was going to eliminate the need for some of those skills, but that was not true at all. Made it more necessary because strategy and tactics and knowledge and the ability to help people get to where they want to go and accomplish those goals all became really even more important because you weren't always in front of someone. We're on a screen, right? And we have to figure out a way to relate to each other. So you're not always going to be in front of everybody. How was that an impact, that historical impact of work, impact how we taught leadership and taught that kind of training now?
You had tremendous insight there, and you really got the thread of why it's been this way. We didn't need leadership on the farm. You didn't need networking when you were on the assembly line. Even when you go back to mid-century and we had big corporate structures, you were a cog in the machine, and your job was to sit there and do what your boss tells you. You didn't have to think and act. And they'd say, do this report. You say, yes, sir. And you do it and say, here you go, sir. What next? And you didn't need these higher order skills. You just needed the mechanical skills as an accountant, an engineer, or a graphic designer, whatever it is you did. It was only in the last 20 to 40 years, depending on how you look at, we got rid of middle management. We went to flatter teams. And it's no longer that, well, I know more than you. So if I'm running a marketing team, for example, in fact, if you put me in charge of marketing, I know quite a bit about marketing. I'm not a TikTok expert. I'm going to turn to some 24-year-old who knows a lot more about TikTok than I do. Even though I know Twitter, I'm not up to date on what are the trends and how to do things. So I don't know more than the people who work for me. And of course, we get these multidisciplinary teams where it's not just we're all marketers. We'll get some product people in there working with us on projects. So suddenly you have these teams where you have a disparate set of skills where the manager doesn't inherently know more than other people. And my job went from, I'm going to crack the whip and make sure you're all turning the screws correctly and quickly, to the paperwork equivalent in the 1950s, to now, hey, we need to get traction on social media. And I don't necessarily know the right answer. My job as a manager is to help the team get the right answer and achieve those results. Just like as a coach, you're not the one throwing the football, you're not running it down the field, but your job is to get the team to work together to achieve that success. And so as managers, we went from, I can do everything you can do, but better, and that's why I'm in charge, to I can't, but my job is to make sure we as a team succeed. And that's where you referred to earlier, that big trip up that people get when you go from being an individual contributor, you do a little bit of work, and they give you a bigger project and bigger project and bigger project. And then suddenly you move to management, and it's not about how much can you do, but how much can you get the team to do.
It's a great point. The Peter principle. You familiar with that at all?
Exactly.
Yes.
People are promoted to their level of incompetence. Well, I'm great at doing this. Make me a manager. Well, now I'm not so great. So I don't get promoted and I'm stuck there.
That's exactly right. And then people realize pretty quickly what someone's cap is because of that. But it's not necessarily what their cap is, it's what they have allowed their cap to become because they didn't get those skills. So your book talks a lot about that. And so you told me something really interesting on the pre-show, where you said each chapter is an individual look at it. So you can go into any chapter and get what you need. Talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's one of the things that people, when they're trying to figure out the skill sets they need, they go, oh, I have to read all 250 pages of this book in order to get this one nugget that I'm looking for, right? Tell them about what they really can gain from your book.
We have two ways to get you around that. So the book, let me give you an overview. And you're right that most books, it's 20 pages of content and 200 pages of filler. And it's such a waste of time. So my book, there's 10 chapters. Let me give you an overview of what the chapters are and then how to use them. 10 chapters in 3 sections. Section 1, career. So chapter 1, how to create and execute a career plan to get you to the job you want. Chapter 2, working effectively. Things like managing your manager, understanding corporate culture. Chapter 3 is interviewing, not just from the candidate side. There's a lot of content on that, but also from the hiring manager side. So many of us in our jobs have to hire other people, but we've had no training. The second section, leadership and management, a chapter on leadership. And then we look at the people side of management and the process side of management. The third section, interpersonal dynamics, covers communication, networking, negotiating, and ethics. So 10 chapters. And you're exactly right. I call it a toolkit because you don't have to use the hammer and then the saw before you get to the screwdriver. If you need a screwdriver, grab the screwdriver and use it. If you buy the book and you say, I want to get better at networking, go right to chapter 8. Read that chapter. It's about 20, 30 pages. You'll read it in less than an hour. And now you've got concrete things you can do to be better at networking. You can skip the other chapters or get back to them when you're ready to tackle those. So we've made it very easy for you to get what you need when you need it in the book and then also in the apps.
So that's fascinating. So you're really covering all the bases. And I think about my own career. Obviously, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, so it's kind of a different thing. But I was in corporate initially, and I remember not understanding what my navigation was going to be in my career, which is why I struck out on my own, which there are plenty of people that can do really well in corporate if they understand the navigation of it and have the patience to understand where to go there. My first question is, what are some of the things that people need to know when navigating their career in order for them to continue to grow in that career, whatever it is?
First, it's to actually have a plan, to know what you're doing. You don't want to, for example, do a road trip and say, let's get in the car and drive. You probably want some destination in mind. And even if you have that destination, if you're in New York and say, we want to get to San Francisco, you probably want to just look ahead of time. By the way, what's the route we might want to take? What are some of those highways? I know today, of course, you can just do it dynamically on your phone because we all have GPS. But in the days we grew up, you paid attention ahead of time. Hey, how do I get from New York to San Francisco? Even if I don't know every small road where we're going to take a detour to go stop at a hotel, I know what the major highways are. I've planned it out. Now, the thing about the plan is we know it's never going to work out. There's going to be traffic. There's going to be construction. There'll be problems. We're going to have to take some detours along the way. But if we don't have a plan, it's utter chaos. The odds of being successful are pretty slim. And again, when you think on the football field, you don't just say, hey, team, go step on the field, go play. You have a plan. Are we going to do a running game? Are we going to do a passing game? Who are we looking out for on the other side? Who's the person we're relying on our side? You have a plan. We know it's not going to work out exactly as you planned, but you start with a plan and you adjust as you go, because without it, you're really just tossing the dice. And that's what we need to do with our careers.
Now, do people need to look? What do you think about mentoring, seeking out mentors? I'll use myself for an example. There wasn't anybody in my family that I could have gone to about a business career, So when I went into the business field, initially, I didn't know who to talk to. I had an MBA. I had an undergraduate. I got my MBA, but I didn't have anybody that was a mentor. I had to seek those out on my own and figure that out on my own. What are some kind of shortcut ideas that people can do in order to really gain kind of a better mentorship to gain them some of the skills they need?
Great question. And yes, you don't have to do this on your own. You can certainly look for additional information out, whether that's from books, listening to podcasts like this one, getting an MBA, learning on the job. That's one way. Having a mentor, whether formally or informally, other people you can learn from is helpful. Joining some type of community, whether it's an online community or local community, finding other people in the same boat. I'm part of founders groups of people who start companies. I'm part of CTO groups of people who lead technology teams. And the great thing is in those communities, I can say, hey, I have a problem. Here's what I'm trying to do. And there's other people who have been down that path and they have that experience and advice. And a lot of people are willing to help you out. So don't do it alone. Find other people. And you can do that whether it's general business. There's also a way to do it for these particular skills. And let's talk about that for a moment. Now, there's a free download on my website about how you can create peer learning groups to develop this. I recommend doing it at your companies. If your company doesn't want to do it, you can do it on your own. Find friends, create a local meetup group. Here's the important thing about these skills and how to learn them. First, these skills are learnable. We think about, well, aren't people just natural at it or not? There are natural leaders, natural communicators, natural networkers. Yes, there are. And there are natural violinists and natural basketball players. But it doesn't mean those of us who aren't natural at it can't go and learn it with practice, with drills, with repetition, with training. We can get better than those who are natural, but don't put in the effort. So all of these skills, leadership, communication, all of this is learnable. The best way to learn, however, it's not the way we learn in school where the teacher says, memorize a periodic table or memorize these dates for the American Revolution. There are no things to memorize. There's no formula for leadership. There's no 3 things to know about networking. These are skills we have to practice, like music, like sports. You want to do it. You want to try. You want to practice. So in these groups, what you want to do is get some content. You can read pages of my book. You can read pages of another book. Listen to a podcast like this one, wherever you get that content. And then in a group, discuss it. Because it's in that discussion, that's how you're learning. That's how I hear your perspective on leadership, which is different than mine. That's how I get some practice. Or I say to the group, hey, I have a communication challenge. I want to convey this to my team. Here's what I'm thinking. And you can share your insights, or I can practice it and get feedback. That's the scrimmage. That's the practice. So with these skills, it's not simply, I heard a podcast, I read a book. You want to go deeper and have that peer learning group. And that's really going to help you learn and acquire these skills. You're on mute. You're muted.
Getting out of your comfort zone is a big deal for a lot of people, and being able to get out of that comfort zone and understand, what they have to do to network with other people, how to relate to other people, how to ask questions that are the right questions that can help them along the way. What are some of the things people can do to get out of that? Because I think that's the biggest obstacle. People get in their own way, right? You and I probably get in our own way. I probably do it 5 times a day. And getting out of your own way on things is probably the biggest obstacle. Whatever's going on up top sometimes blocks you. Oh, it's not that important that I talk to this person right now. What are some of the skills and strategies from a networking standpoint that people can use to get out of their comfort zone and start to get the information they need?
It's really practice. For networking and for so many of these skills, it comes down to practice. And we know with the sports analogy, what do you do with the drilling? You're building up muscle memory. So you're just in the moment. So it's natural. You don't have to mechanically think, what are the 3 things I have to do? It just happens. When you think, for example, about public speaking, we're going to use this as an example because most people have experience with it. Most of us, the reason we are not good at public speaking is fear. Is, oh my God, I'm going to say the wrong thing, or my pants are not zipped up, or there's something on my shirt, or I'm just going to embarrass myself or forget what I say. And oh my God, and all these things are in my head and they're holding me back. Experienced speakers, now I still get nervous before I go on stage, but I also know, first, I've done it many times successfully. I've done it a few times where things have gone wrong. And you know what? It's okay. We think back to middle school when someone would drop their tray and then everyone would applaud and you'd be embarrassed as everyone's looking at you. You know what happens in the adult world when you're on stage and you make a mistake? You trip a little over the microphone cord or you flub your words. You move on. No one's saying they're laughing at you. We're adults. It happens to all of us. Okay, yeah, fine. You're human. And once you get that experience of, you know what, I did it. Hey, I tripped up a little, but that's okay. It reduces the fear. You start to say, not a problem. When you go to networking events, maybe you meet some great people. Maybe you don't, but you say, yeah, that's okay. Maybe you did talk to someone and 60 seconds later, he had to excuse himself because he was bored or wanted to catch someone else. That's, oh, I got rejected a little. Then you say, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. And it's building up that experience to say, yeah, I don't have to be perfect and it's not a problem. And removing that fear. That is key.
That's so important. So removing that fear, and I say not taking yourself so seriously that you think that it's something that you're doing, because most of the time if someone doesn't want to talk to you, it has to do with them. It has zero to do with you. If someone's not interested in what you're saying, it has to do with their own interest, their own kind of selfish guidelines that they have, that they're not looking to talk to you at this moment. And that's one of the things that people have to be able to realize. And I think that's an important understanding, that it's not personal. Okay. Relationships are personal, but rejection, a lot of times, it is not personal. More to times has to do with something that they have as a priority that's different than your priority. And that's one of the things I think we have to get past over and over again, with respect to fear of it, is that when you get rejected, it's everyone always thinks, oh, what did I do? What did I do? And yes, occasionally, sometimes, there's something that you did do, but it's always rooted in their own guiding principles first. So when they're rejecting you, it's because it doesn't match with their guiding principles. That's why they're moving on. It really doesn't have to do with whatever your ideals are, your stance, or your business philosophy, or your management philosophy. It has to do that it's different from their philosophy. And once we understand that, I think it really helps us to kind of move forward and not get caught and backlogged on those kind of things. What are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. And we see this not just for networking or these skills. I'll give an example. It happened to a friend of mine. She applied to a very big tech company last year, one whose name you all know, and did the interviews, then nothing. And she started to panic because they promised that they would get back within 2 or 3 days. And she didn't hear anything after 3 days. And then after a week and after two, and she said, oh my God, what did I do wrong? I screwed up. And my response to her, having been on the other side, I said, why do you think it's you? She said, but they promised within 3 days. A few months later, they got back to her and said, so sorry, we had a reorg. We had a bunch of things going on. We'd love to bring you on. And she's now happily in that job. And I can tell you, having been on the hiring manager side, well, often we're in the process of hiring and then something happens. Oh, we lost a key customer. Do we have to do a hiring freeze? Or, oh, we're rebudgeting, or, oh, we're reorging, or something's happening. And, oh, wait, we just got another candidate who's not for this role, but a different role, but it could impact this role. All sorts of things happen that you don't know about. You not being good is the least of the problems. In fact, if I knew you weren't right, those are the ones I do fastest. Oh, yeah, reject this person. This person doesn't fit. When you're saying they're wondering, it means I haven't rejected you yet. I'm trying to figure things out. But we internalize, we go that critic, that, oh my God, I'm an idiot, I'm screwing up, I'm bad. And we need to silence or at least mute a bit that critic and all the things we do, and know most of it is external, not internal. It's other things in the world, and it's not us. And it comes from experience. It just comes from knowing, yeah, you know what? It's not me most of the time. As long as I didn't do something really bonehead, okay, I'm not going to blame myself.
Right. And even if you do, you move on the next time you correct it. Right. So that's the key thing. Fail forward on a lot of things. Don't let it bog you down. Hiring. Okay. And I know myself, having hired quite a few people over the years, I've always struggled with hiring, and I've always struggled with hiring the right people. And a lot of it has to do with, I think it's more me. Like, I have these rose-colored glasses when I'm going into it. Whatever my own things are. How does someone who's hiring somebody, and I think very successful people sometimes struggle with the hiring part, because they either think the other person is going to be like them, or they hope they're going to be like them, or they think they're going to have to share the exact same ideals. How do you learn the correct way or the best way to hire people so you can create a better organization?
We unfortunately hire through a very narrow lens. Suppose, for example, you are hiring an accountant. So, okay, well, I need to make sure she knows accounting. So I'm going to ask her all these accounting questions and see her answers and see how well she knows accounting. That is easy to do. Great, done. Okay, she is sufficiently knowledgeable about accounting. But then there's all these other attributes that we don't think about. And this has to do with her personality and leadership and communication and cultural fit. And all these are things that we don't always consider but matter. And so we, as hiring managers, take far too narrow a role, and we don't even communicate on our team. So consider you and I are both hiring someone in accounting. We're saying, well, this person needs to be a leader. She's going to lead the accounting team. Okay, so accounting skills and leadership. Well, first, what does leadership mean? There's no one type of leader. There are leaders who, hey, you have a team of 5 people, they're doing great. You just keep an eye on them. That's maybe a little more management. Sometimes you say, hey, we have a team of no people, and you have to build up this team and create how that team is going to work. That's a different set of leadership skills. That's different still from there's a team of 5 people. They're all really demoralized. The last leader was terrible. They've had no guidance. You have to turn them around from demoralized to high performing. That's a different set of leadership skills. So first, what type of leader are we looking for? Second, you might think, well, leadership is really important. And yeah, accounting skills second. But I might think, no, accounting knowledge is really important. And then leadership skills too. Well, now we're using different evaluation criteria. How are we going to do that? We have to get on the same page about what we're looking for and the prioritization. And then once we say, okay, now we know we're looking for this type of leader and here's how important it is, how do we actually evaluate the candidate's leadership skills? So there's a whole bunch of things we need to do beyond just, do you know accounting? These other skills. And that's where we haven't been intentional. But I talk about the different aspects you should look at and how to be intentional in evaluating that.
That's important. And the values that you come into the interview process with. Um, the interview process, I've always found to be very, very difficult. You could go and interview someone and you have your plan and your criteria and that you're looking for. You interview them, and I can't tell you how many times this has happened. I'm sure our audience has experienced this as well. When you go and hire the person, they come in and it was obviously they're putting their best foot forward. They come in and then 30 days into it, you're like, who is this person? So how do you manage that process? You know they had the right skill set that you wanted. Now, how do you coach them into your expectations within your culture? What's the important part of that? Is training an important part? What are some of the important areas there?
Well, a few things. First, judge by actions, not words. So, for example, if I were to ask someone, what are your best qualities? They're going to give me some answer that we all know how to answer that because we looked up online. Instead, what I like to ask is, if you were hiring someone for this role, what would you look for? Because that tells me what they think is important. It's less direct, and people haven't really been trained how to answer that. Or tell me, where have you focused your time in the past 2 years on improving yourself? That tells me what they think is important by their actions and not just by their words. So I get to actions, not words. And when someone gives me words, I drill in and say, basically explain your actions that demonstrate that. Not in those literal words, but I'll have follow-up questions to get to show me instead of just telling me. Now, there's other stuff that we should do. And another free download I have on my resources page is a list of cultural questions. These are questions the candidate should ask. As a manager, you should also discuss them. Both sides are better off when we talk about these and figure out, is there a cultural fit or not? Because if there's not, we're both better off with someone not taking the job. And if you're not sure how to raise these, what I say in the corresponding article is you can blame me. So as you get to the end of the interview process, and I say, okay, any questions? You might ask about how do you do this, or tell me a little about the company. Say, hey, listen, there's this guy, Mark Herschberg, and he says we should go over these questions. It's better for you and I if we go through these questions during the interview process. So I've brought them with me, or I have them on my phone, or I've got them written down. Let's go through questions. Because now you're not saying, hey, I'm going to pepper you with a bunch of questions. You're saying, this guy, Mark, the expert over here, says we need to do this. So it's a little easier to bring it up and have that open discussion. It's just like when you are dating and talking about marriage, don't just say, hey, I love you, you love me, great, let's do this. Say, wait a second. By the way, do you want kids? Because I want kids. Oh, wait, you don't? Okay, that's a problem. Where do you want to live? Is that somewhere I'm okay living? Let's talk about how we're going to split up household chores. If you're not on the same page, it doesn't matter how much you love each other. That's going to be a difficult marriage. So discuss it ahead of time. Same thing when you're taking that job.
Very, very interesting. Let's take a little sidestep here. So you're a very accomplished ballroom dancer, champion ballroom dancer. What are some of the principles that you learned? Because that's a very disciplined, highly disciplined sport that you have to do things a certain way. There's technique. What did you learn in that you applied in everything that you do now?
I'd say there were 3 things I got out of it. First is that you do need to drill and practice. So we would train what our routine was. But when you're on the floor, you never do the routine exactly as planned, because as you're doing this beautiful movement, someone gets in your way. And as I'm flowing across the floor and I'm going backwards, I feel a little squeeze on my shoulder from my partner who says, hey, you're about to hit someone. So all of a sudden I adjust my step, or I'll hold a particular move. I'll do it bigger or shorter or more staccato or slower to adjust to the music. So I've trained, I've practiced, I've got the muscle memory, but in real time, I can adjust because I don't have to be as conscious of that. I've got that muscle memory built up. So you want to train and then adjust when you've got that deep knowledge. The second thing I learned is it's okay to screw up. Now, we talked before about public speaking and oh my God, I'm going to say the wrong thing. Ballroom dancing was one of the best things I did for my public speaking. Obviously, we're not talking during ballroom dancing, but I've been out on the floor, literally being judged, and I've screwed up. And I've done things where I say, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. Oh, and the judge was looking right at me. And you know what? I didn't make it to the next round. And life moved on. And that's okay. And so learning how to do that, and this will apply if you do any type of sport, anything where people are looking at you, if you do any type of performance, acting, or comedy, if you're going to do it, you're going to screw up and you're going to move on and say, I realize it's not the end of the world. So that's the second thing. The third thing, now most people don't know this, MIT has one of the top ballroom dance teams in the country. We were arguably number 1 or 2 when I was there. We had one of the biggest in the country. And really being a part of that group, of having all these other phenomenal dancers around saying, yes, we're pushing ourselves and I'm pushing myself along with them, that was helpful. So surrounding yourself with other people who are good, who are committed. And by good, I don't mean, oh, they have to be better than me. I mean, they have that drive to improve, to make a quality organization, team, performance. So don't say, oh, well, you don't know as much as me, I don't want to work with you. You probably know more than me in some area. I don't know what yet, but you have that drive to let's do well. Those are the people I want on my team.
So it's very interesting because basically, it falls in line with exactly what, the principles of our developing your career, right? You got to train, adjust, you got to fail and learn from that. And then you want to be part of a team that's like-minded and aiming for the similar goals, right? So that's really, really interesting. But my only experience with ballroom dancing is with Silver Linings Playbook. Have you ever seen that movie where with
I haven't yet seen that one.
Yes,
but I know there is dancing in it.
Yes. So that she's trying to learn ballroom dancing. So it's very, very interesting that there's a component of that to it. Yeah, I think you find it interesting. But yeah, I remember that's my only experience with it. and I saw the discipline in it, which was phenomenal. The amount of discipline you have to be able to do such a great job in it. But that was really interesting. So now the messaging for people listening that in their career, I want to go from 0 to 60. I want to become a successful CEO, and I'm in middle management. What do I have to do? What are some of like a couple of things, 2 or 3 takeaways that I need to have in order to? Everyone wants to do things fast, right? Fast track this, right? And obviously, there's no such thing as really a fast track. That fast track might be 15 years. Okay, it might be 10 years. Everybody's at a different pace. What are a few things that people need to master as soon as they can to start to get the most out of their career?
Let's just put a note about fast tracking, because back in the 90s, during the dot-com era, I had lots of friends who quickly became CEOs, CTOs, C whatevers.
That was
And they
me.
did
I
so
didn't know
because
what I
they
was
said,
doing.
right. And they said, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but I started the company. I'm taking the title. Well, congrats, you have the title. Many of them failed. Those who didn't often struggled for a number of years and wasted time and money and effort figuring it out. I said, you know what? I can make myself a CTO tomorrow. I could find some star and be like, make me a CTO. Or I could say, there is a skills gap. And so this is what I recommend. Talk to people in those roles. Look at it from afar and talk to people in them and understand what are the actual skills, and then be honest and evaluate yourself. And you're going to find you have a skills gap. There are areas where you're strong. You might say, hey, I know everything about leadership. I am a great leader today, but I am not great at networking. And that's really important to be a CEO, to run a business. I have to work on that skill. Or I need more knowledge of finance. I know how to do this thing, but I don't know the first thing about accounting. And if I'm running a company, I better be able to understand how's the money working here. So whatever your gaps are, whether it's these skills we talk about in the book or other mechanical skills, look at where you have a gap and then say, how can I address it? Now, by the way, you don't need to be an expert in all of these. In finance, for example, you don't need to say, well, I have to be a master accountant. I'm going to hire an accountant. They're going to do all the details and the bookkeeping and how to use QuickBooks. But I need to know enough to have a conversation with them, to know what's happening in the company, to ask relevant questions. On the other hand, networking, you know what, as a CEO, I am the person out there building relationships, finding new clients, doing all these other things. That comes down to me. Yeah, I'll have a salesperson, but really a lot of it's going to be on me because it's more than just about selling. So I can't just say, well, let someone else do it and supervise. I've got to own that. So look at your skills gap, look at each skill, where you need to be, how short you are, and then come up with a plan to fill in that gap.
Very, very interesting stuff. Yeah, the bridge, the gap between what your skills are and where they need to be is often a huge issue. I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. Tell everyone where they can find your book, get a hold of your book, get to your apps, get to your website. Where can they go?
There's 2 websites. The first, thecareertoolkitbook.com. And that's where you can learn more about the book. You can buy it on Amazon or other places. You can get in touch with me with questions or follow me on social media. You can download the free companion app, the Career Toolkit app, on Apple and Android. And we link to it from the website. And that has a lot of the content in the book that we provide to you on either a just-in-time basis, when you, oh my God, what were those tips? And you pull it up on the app, or we do a passive daily push to help you retain it. So 2 seconds a day, it just pops up on your phone. You look at it, go, right, well, remember that, swipe it away, and that will help you retain it. There's also the resources page with a number of free resources, like the Career Toolkit Development Program. That's that peer learning program we talked about, as well as those cultural questions during the interview. All of that is free on the careertoolkitbook.com. There's also cognoscomedia.com, COGNOSCO, the makers of Brain Bump. And Brain Bump, it's a similar app, except it doesn't just have my book. It has other books, podcasts, blogs, and talks. And you get the same highlight content from those that you can get just in time or on that passive reminder basis. And that's going to help you retain more content to develop your leadership and other skills. So the careertoolkitbook.com and cognoscomedia.com with Brain Bump.
That is awesome. Fantastic stuff. I mean, I learned a ton today. The MIT education did you well.
Thank you.
That's great. Really, I thank you so much for coming on. I got to get a hold of that copy of that book just so I can understand all the things, and I'm fascinated by it. Thanks so much for coming on the Success for Life podcast. Fantastic stuff. If you want to enhance your career, get this book, understand what he's talking about, understand what Mark is discussing, and get to where you need to be. Don't hold back. Go after what your dreams are and get a plan to get it together. Mark's got the way for you to do it. Thanks again, Mark, for being on the Success for Life podcast.